because the odds would have been stacked against you.
Mm-hmm.
Ups and downs. Was it like an innate, God's going to do this? Did someone put that seed in you, or were you just born with, I'm going to do this, I'm going to make it?
That's a great question. I mean,
You are a walking revenue stream. that's what I'm calling it. But one of the things you do is the Breakfast Club, which continues to be one of the premier culture-shaping voices as a show.
Thank God.
What's the day like?
I give you the last 48. Last 48, I wake up 4 o'clock in the morning, come in here and do the Breakfast Club. My Brilliant Idiots podcast with Andrew Schultz. Go to Philly to go with my guy Wallow, because Wallow just put out his new book called Armed with Good Intention. So I went to go moderate his book signing in Philly. Came back home, went to sleep, woke up again at 4 o'clock, and I'm going to go work out at 1:30. Then I got like 2 more meetings. Then I got parent-teacher night tonight at 7 o'clock.
Tune in. Parent-teacher night. With marriage and mental health, when did that for you go, this has to change?
I was becoming what I hated. And what I hated was the way my dad did my mother back in the day. Like, I saw my dad through drugs and alcohol and infidelity ruin his marriage, right? And so I didn't want to become that.
What do you think about the Black culture and the way Black men see mental health? Do you feel like it's changing?
Because everybody's sharing their stories. I always say in order to eradicate the stigma around mental health, everybody has to share their story. One thing I have to do is I have to raise my kids out of love and not fear. Because I feel like my father raised me out of fear.
Yeah.
Because he went through everything he went through, and he just didn't want his oldest son to go through those same things. I'm already on record saying that Kendrick Lamar's Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers in the future, that and Jay-Z 444, we're going to look at and say these are probably the 2 most important hip-hop albums of all time, just because of the subject matter those brothers decided to tackle, right? Like those brothers think they're talking about going to therapy, they're talking about doing right by their wives, right?
Who would have thought you would have heard that
from
Jay-Z, at the top of the game?
Yes, or even Kendrick, right?
But for people to hear today that when they see you in the bright lights, oh, he struggled with some of the same things that maybe people have, and it frees them today. What do you do when you feel the panic and the anxiety set in, that you have learned to be like, I can't live without tool that gets you back to center and makes your spirit feel and realize that you're calm?
Easy call for me. When I was young.
Is there any hope for white people? Okay.
That's a good, come on, start using that question.
Oh, Lord Jesus. Lights on, Charlamagne Tha God. I also love the name your mother gave you.
Yes, Leonard McKelvey.
So grateful for you to fit this in, man. This is it's special.
Happy to be here. I mean, you've been on Breakfast Club, you've been on Brilliant Idiot, so I got to return that favor.
Yeah, we go back. I was sitting here thinking about how exactly when I met you, which was Andrew Schultz was playing Jay Williams in a one-on-one game.
Yes.
And I met you in Wax, and you've just been a really loyal, faithful, supportive, encouraging friend.
Thank you, sir.
So,
I've met some good people through you. Somebody who gives me a lot of advice and information, and I look at them as a mentor. The good brother TP, Tyler Perry. So yeah.
Tyler's special. You needed somebody in your air, in that space that gets it. So we're sitting here. You have a thing called the Black Effect behind you, which is basically the empire you're building. Are you going to include white people on the Black Effect? Because I'm going to put a petition in to be one of the white voices on Black Effect. I'm kidding. It's such a cool, even the name of your book was awesome. Not the last one, the one before that, it was Black Privilege.
Yep.
And
that's actually my first one. Black Privilege was my first one. Second one was Shook One, Anxiety Playing Tricks on Me. And the new one is Get Honest or Die Lying, Why Small Talk Sucks.
Okay, so my question is, at what point, well, first of all, before I even say that, did you think you'd make it here?
Yes, absolutely, 100%.
Say more. How?
When I started off as an intern in Charleston, South Carolina in 1998, working at Z93 Jams in Charleston, South Carolina, I literally started off as a unpaid intern. So, I was the guy that would go to the radio station, drive the station vehicles to different remotes with the other personalities. I would be helping to put up the posters, put up the tents, whatever I needed to do. And then eventually I got hired in the promotions department. So basically you're still an unpaid intern, but you're making I don't know, with the $5 an hour back then. I don't even know what it was. And so I would always be at the station because I literally had nothing else to do. You got to think, I'm coming from getting kicked out of 2 high schools, getting my degree in night school. I was working odd jobs like, a clothing store in the mall called Demo. I did telemarketing. I had nothing to do. So if I was at home in Monk's Corner, I would just be probably hanging out in the hood, getting in trouble. So I would just always be at the radio station. And I remember one day, my man named Ron White, still my guy to this day, he said to me, man, you ever thought about being on the air? Because I would, like my man, there was a guy named Willie Will who used to do nights. And so I would be in there with him so much that, because we used to rap together, so I would just get on the mic and talk sometime. And Ron was like, man, I think you should try doing radio. And so I did it, starting, they started me off voice tracking Sunday mornings, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. And that led to me ending up doing Saturday nights live. And then I remember after the first year, I was just sitting in the studio, and this was kind of like the early beginnings of the internet. And I just started listening to other radio personalities around the country. Now, mind you, in the market I was in, Charleston, South Carolina, we had Tom Joyner. We had Doug Banks, God bless the dead. So I knew them and I would listen to them. But man, when I started hearing New York radio, it just opened my mind to something different. So the Howard Sterns, the Wendy Williams, the Angie Martinez's, right? And I was just like, yo, if I do radio, I want to do it on that level. I was like, I want to be a super jock. So I want to be a Tom Joyner, a Doug Banks, a Angie Martinez, a Wendy Williams, because those were the super jocks to me. And I was like, I want to do that. So 1999, I said, that's what I'm going to be. I am going to be what we called a super jock back then. I didn't want to be the local radio personality, no disrespect to none of them, but I don't want to be the local radio personality just in a market doing the time and temperature, introducing, the next Sexy Red song. That's not what I wanted to do. Yeah. I wanted to be the nationally syndicated super jock. So yes, I knew I was going to be that.
Where does that come from? Because Monk's Corner, also shout out to our guy Stephen Furtick. Whatever was in the water in Monk's Corner, brought out at least 2 people that are changing the world.
Hey everybody, this is Hector Guerrero, producer of the Lights On Show, and we just want you to know we're grateful for you, the early adopters of the B-Side. If you haven't yet, go download and subscribe, because that's where we get to upload lots of cool exclusive content just for you. We have live events. What I mean by that is live podcast shows coming to your city with 500 plus seats, where we all get to build a community together and see each other with Tim, with Carl, with Lecrae. We just love you guys, and we're so grateful that you are here with us in Lights On and as we build this community. So please go download and subscribe to the BSIDE app, get into our Discord, and let's build this community together. Okay, love you guys. Peace.
But was it your mom and dad? Was it your relationship with God? Like, how do you even, with those odds, because the odds would have been stacked against you. I'm driving up here this morning. I'm looking around what you're building. You built something so special. The odds would say, no, and I know even back in the day, you had some moments with the law. You've been through ups and downs. Was it like an innate, God's going to do this in me so I can change the world? Or was it did someone put that seed in you? Or were you just born with, I'm going to do this, I'm going to make it?
That's a great question. I mean, when I think about my mom and my dad and I think about my grandmother, one thing that they did instill in me was a real strong faith in a higher power, because my grandmother was a Baptist. My mother was a Jehovah's Witness. My dad was a Jehovah's Witness for a while until he got this fellowship, but then he got into Islam. So he would always sit me down and tell me to watch speeches from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. He gave me the autobiography of Malcolm X to read, which led me to read, Message to the Black Man by Elijah Muhammad. I was always reading all the Watchtowers and all the Awakes and my book of Bible stories. So prayer is really all I knew. I remember being young and feeling this presence, right, always with me, especially when I was asleep. Whenever I would lay my head down, I would feel this presence. And in my mind, it was Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5 poster that I had on my wall, right? Because they had just went on, I think they had just started, I forgot what tour it was, but it was the world tour they went on as they were adults. And I had that poster on my wall. Yeah. And I used to always think, oh, that's Michael and his brothers looking over me, but that was God. I always felt like that, to the point where I would be sleeping. We grew up in a single-wide trailer, so my room was right by the kitchen. And I used to, open my eyes sometime and just see this presence. I would see, this figure just standing there. And it wasn't anything I was afraid of. It wasn't anything I was scared of. It wasn't something I could make out and say, that's a man, that's a woman. I just knew it was a figure. I just knew it was a presence. And I just always, always felt like I was being watched over by what I eventually started to call God. So when I was in those moments at the radio station, I I don't know what led me even to radio. I remember, like I said, I wanted to rap. And so I would be in the studio with Willie Will, and Willie Will was a radio personality. And so I just asked him, yo, how'd you get into radio? And he was like, I went down there and I got an internship. And I was like, is that easy? I can just go down there and get an internship? And he was like, yeah. And mind you, this is 1998 in Charleston, South Carolina. Things were a lot different.
Yeah, wow.
So that's what I did. I went down there and I got an internship. So I can only chalk it up to God. Like, God is the only entity that can put, that type of vision in you, that type of purpose in you, and say, this is what I want you to do. Even when you mentioned Stephen Furtick, like, my wife was in class with Stephen Furtick at Berkeley High School, and everybody talked about how great of a speaker Stephen Furtick was. Everybody. Like, that was his
already his MO.
That was his MO back then in high school. Everybody spoke about how this kid, Stephen Furtick, was such a fantastic speaker. So to see him, be a pastor now and doing what he's doing, it doesn't surprise me at all.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I got a lot of parents that check into our podcast, which is great. You just brought up a really important thing, which is there were seeds in you. So despite the odds, you had somebody who had the wherewithal to tell you, there's this relationship with God you can have that can change your life, and spoke life into you.
That's right.
Do you feel like that's a true statement, like people were encouraging to you going up, or did it get to a point where it was just you against the world and you had to go? Because what I see, and what I mean by that is, I see a lot of people, and I know you know this too, they love what you have. They want nothing to do with what you did to get here. Nothing. Like, even give me a snapshot of even what this day is like. So you do a morning show every day. You are a walking revenue stream. that's why I'm calling it. It's revenue stream right there. But one of the things you do is the Breakfast Club, which continues to be, one of the premier culture shaping voices as a show.
Thank God.
It's amazing. I mean, between you and then you got Joe Rogan over there, and you got maybe two other people, but there's not a lot of voices that have broken through like that. What's the day like? What time do you have to go to bed?
Well, I give you the last 48. Last 48, I wake up 4 o'clock in the morning to do radio, come in here, do the Breakfast Club. I think yesterday, because we tape all of our interviews after the show. So the interviews you hear live on the show are never live. We tape them the day before. So I think we did 2 interviews yesterday. We had DeMar DeRozan, and we had who else was here yesterday? I can't remember. I remember DeMar DeRozan came here yesterday. So we interviewed DeMar DeRozan and somebody else. And then I went home for a second, then came back into the city to do my Brilliant Idiots podcast with Andrew Schultz. And, everything got to be right on time, right? So I know I leave here 10 o'clock, 10:30. I think actually I left here a little bit like 11 yesterday. Got home like 12, just enough time to change clothes, get back in the car, come back to do the podcast, leave Brilliant Idiots podcast at 4 o'clock to go to Philly, to go with my guy Wallow, because Wallow just put out his new book called Armed with Good Intention. So I went to go moderate his book signing in Philly, went to do that, came back home, went to sleep, woke up again at 4 o'clock. His book signing was at 7, so I left there at like 8:30, so I got home like 10:40. Woke back up at 4:15, came here to do Breakfast Club. As I'm doing Breakfast Club, 2 friends of mine came to see me because they wanted to pitch something to me at 8 o'clock. So being that we had a pre-taped interview from 8 to 8:30, I had time in between Breakfast Club to go have that meeting. Then we were supposed to interview somebody at 9 o'clock, but they had to reschedule. So that opened up an hour for me, which was good. But we still had an interview with Fawn Weaver, who's the founder of Uncle Nearest Whiskey.
She's awesome.
Which has a $1.1 billion valuation. It's an amazing story to watch her, because she was here 7 years ago, first telling us about the whiskey, now to see it have a $1.1 billion valuation. So did that conversation, finished up a couple of stuff with radio. Now I'm sitting here with you doing this conversation. Then I'm going to leave here, and I'm going to go work out at 1:30. Then I got like 2 more meetings. Then I got parent-teacher night tonight at 7 o'clock.
Let's do it in. Parent-teacher night. That's amazing. I think it's good for people to know, and I hope we always have people that are like budding superstars, listening to this, or people who have big dreams. You just got to ante up to be able to do the work.
That's it.
Because it's not like, this is not an easy life to live, but you've made it something that's had such a huge impact. When did you take a turn for, I know your mental health and your marriage went from one place to another. Can you talk about that? Because I know there was a moment in your life where there was some sort of shift. I mean, you've always been incredibly bold. That's a whole nother, if we had 2 hours, I would dig into how on earth you get the courage to say it like you feel it in a world that wants to tell you to be very careful. That's one of the things I love about you. You just do not give two you know what's. But when did that, with marriage and mental health, when did that for you go, this has to change?
For me, it was.
Have you had mental health journey struggles, battles, like where you've had to figure it out?
Oh yeah, my whole life I've been dealing with really bad anxiety and bouts of depression. So
what does that look like for you?
Man, when I was young, even now, I got more of a handle on it now. But when I was young, I used to have these real bad panic attacks, like those uncontrollable panic attacks where, when I was a kid, I'm either like crying uncontrollably, scared to death, of whatever environment I'm in. Don't necessarily know why. Nobody can calm me down. I don't even know why I got to this place. And I was dealing with that my whole life. Like, I'd be the guy walking down the dirt road in Moncks Corner, South Carolina, and then see a car coming and go run in the cornfield or go run in the woods to hide for no reason. Like, just straight panic. Like, what's going on? And that's something that's just carried on with me forever. And then, like, around I got to start with 2010, right? 2010, I had just gotten fired for the 4th time from radio. I was back home living with my mom in Moncks Corner, South Carolina. I think I might have been 31, 32 years old. My daughter might have been like 1 or 2. My now wife, because we from the same hometown, so she had to go live back with her parents in Moncks Corner
as well.
Absolutely. Her and Stephen Fred was in school together, so we
just said that,
all in Moncks Corner. And she had to go back. We grew up living 5 minutes from each other, so she had to go back home living with her parents. And I remember just driving down I-26 in South Carolina and having one of those massive panic attacks. Wow. Where you could not tell me, this is it. I'm about to have a heart attack. It's over. Fred Sanford, Elizabeth from Coming to Join the Young. Like, I just thought it was
Fred
done.
Sanford, yeah.
I just thought it was done. So I go to the doctor like I usually do when I have those, really bad panic attacks. Doctor tells me the same thing. You got an athlete's heart. Your heart is fine. There's nothing wrong with your heart. And then he goes, yo, do you suffer from anxiety? And I'm like, anxiety? What is anxiety? He was like, it sounded to me like you had an anxiety attack, what we call a panic attack. And I'm like, no, I never had that. And then he goes, are you stressed out about anything? And I go, hell yeah, I'm stressed out about it. Stuff like, right? And so in my mind, all I had to do was get another radio job, get out my mama's house, get my family back in some apartment or something.
And that would fix it.
And everything would be good. Next gig I got was The Breakfast Club, right, in 2010. Life-changing, right? So 4 or 5 years later, I'm making more money than I've ever made in my life. I've got more success than I've ever had in my life. But that didn't change anything. If anything, it might have made things worse because, number one, I wasn't living the way I was supposed to be living, right? Because my wife was still living at home in Moncks Corner. She came up here in like 20. If I got here 2010, she might have came back. She came up here like 2012, something like that.
Tough to have a vibrant marriage.
Yeah,
in different locales.
Yeah, especially when you out every night in the clubs, drinking, doing drugs, living the radio star lifestyle in New York City, right? And mind you, I had been in New York before when I was here in 2006 with Wendy, but now I'm back. So it's not even like my first time in New York. It's like, oh, Charlamagne's back on, the radio, and now he's got DJ Envy and it's Angelique, and they got this thing called The Breakfast Club, and like, yo, you should really listen. And so I never experienced that kind of success. And so I was just losing it. I was losing my freaking mind. Like, literally, I was not living the way I was supposed to be living in any way, shape, or form. And it was eating me up on the inside. Because, you got to play so many different roles. You got to play this role when you're on the radio, and then you got to play this role when you with your girl, right? Then you play this role when you're in the street. Like, it's just all of these different roles.
Mask on, mask off.
Mask on, mask off. And it's like to the point where it's like, who are you? And I remember around 2015, around 2015, it's actually 2016. I remember being in a hotel room with a young lady. And my wife, I was in L.A., and my wife calls me. And I'm like, oh, that's my wife. And it was FaceTime. And the young lady was like, oh, I'll hide under the covers. And I'm like, hide under the covers? And I answered the phone. And, just a little small chit-chat. Young lady stayed under the covers, hung up. And then my wife called me back, but it was just a phone call. And I'm like, oh, let me answer the phone. So I answered the phone, walk out. I said, I'm going to walk out the room this time. I'm not going to stay in the room. So I answered the phone. She's like, what are you doing? I'm like, nothing, sleeping. She's like, no, what are you doing? I'm like, what you mean I'm sleeping? She's like, no, what are you doing with your life? you about to lose everything, including us. Like, literally, that was the conversation. And I'm like, looking around, like, what am I being my own punked or something? Or like, is there cameras following me? Like,
Wow.
That's why I say woman's intuition is no joke.
No, it's not.
And I think in that moment, if I remember correctly, in that moment, I just was like, I can't go out like this, because I was becoming what I hated. And what I hated was the way my dad did my mother back in the day. Like, I saw my dad, through drugs and alcohol and infidelity, ruin his marriage, right? And so I didn't want to become that. Like, literally, I was becoming what I had hated. Like, and so I just remember another time, that was 2015, so it might have been that next summer. I remember being on vacation, and while I was on vacation, I just had a sense of peace, and I had never felt that, right? Now, mind you, in that moment, from that hotel room, that was like, matter of fact, it was October 2016. I know this for a fact. I shouldn't know this, but I do. October 2016 is when I was just like, I'm not messing with no other women. I'm not doing any of that. So it was the next summer of 2017, or it might have been New Year's of 2016. But I think it was the next summer. I'm pretty sure it was the next summer. And I remember saying to myself, yo, I haven't felt peace like this in a long time. And I was like, yo, how can I keep this peace? How can I keep this peace? How can I keep this peace? And I'd always been talking about going to therapy and telling my wife I wanted to, go to therapy. That first step was me being real with myself and letting myself know I'm not living right.
Yes.
And stopping that part. And after doing that for a few months, I'm like, you know what? I am ready to take that next step and go to, therapy, which is what I did. But so that next summer, I decided, to start going to therapy. It came in a moment of peace, which I hadn't felt. And, I've learned that we call those glimmers, right?
Yes.
Like, we talk about triggers all the time.
Right.
And those things that trigger you. But me being on vacation with my family and my in-laws and my mom and everybody, and it's just like, oh, man, I just felt a moment of peace that I hadn't felt in a while. So I wanted to hold on to that, and I wanted to feel that more often.
Yeah.
So I started going to therapy in, like, the summer of 2016. Yeah. And that just changed everything for me.
Do you think that's powerful? I appreciate you sharing it. I've got a couple moments like that in my own life that I look back on with therapy. Do you feel like Black men, the Black culture, do you feel like we're going to turn a corner with the way therapy is seen? Because why I ask is when I went to the rehab that I went to, I said to one of the directors, I said, I love this place. This is cool, but how many Black men have you come through here? Because there's one. There was, like, with rehabs, there's like an incoming class and then an outgoing. So there's like a constant flow of people. And he said, we don't have a lot of Black men that come through this rehab. And this is one of the top rehabs in Arizona. And they had no answers because typically they're not going to be digging for why. And then over the years, as I've been living a sober life and I've been in a lot of meetings, it's always, there might be one or two Black men on these calls, but not as many. What do you think that's attributed to? Do you feel like it's a lack of access? Do you feel like it's still a stigma? Because I know in now the swing, the way that the community that I live in now, the swing is like everyone talks about therapy being great and they acknowledge it. And even if they don't do it, there's people using therapy words now because you look like an idiot if you still try to push back. What do you think about the Black culture and the way Black men see mental health? Do you feel like it's changing?
I definitely.
Well, let me say it is changing because of men like you, by the way. I mean, you have ripped the Band-Aid off some of that. So I just acknowledge the bravery that's taken. But why is that so different right now?
I think it's changing because everybody's sharing their stories. I always say in order to eradicate the stigma around mental health, everybody has to share their story because it's just like anything else, right? Everybody feels out of place, or everybody feels like an outlier or a misfit until you realize that, man, there's other people going through exactly what I'm going through. When I started talking about dealing with anxiety and bouts of depression and going to therapy every day at 3 o'clock, people thought it was a joke on the radio until they was like,
"Are you really doing this?"
Yeah, I can see a little shift, like something's different, right? Yeah. And so when I started sharing those stories, I started meeting so many people that were going through the same thing. I deal with anxiety. I deal with depression. I deal with PTSD. Like, hey, my uncle started going to therapy because of you. Charlamagne, my husband started going to therapy because of you. So all of a sudden I started this village, and then not just, people, the psychiatrists, the therapists hitting me up saying, man, there's so many people starting to come, to therapy. I'm meeting people that are coming to therapy telling me they started coming because of you. And so I think everybody sharing their stories is starting to erase the stigma. One of the great stories that happened to me, and I like to tell it a lot, is that 2018, it was the week of Thanksgiving 2018, and I'm home in Moncks Corner, South Carolina, and my dad calls me, and he just finished reading my second book, Shook One, Anxiety Playing Tricks on Me. Shook One was literally about everything that I was learning in therapy, because what happens when you have a successful book, right? Black Privilege was instant New York Times bestseller, was on the New York Times bestsellers list for weeks, on all the other national bestsellers list for weeks. Immediately, they want another book. And I'm like, I just gave you my life up to this point.
I got to reload.
Yeah, I don't have another book. And I really didn't have anything at that time because I was actually the most confused I had ever been in my life because of therapy. Because you go into therapy and you don't realize, you think you're going to learn things.
It disorients you.
You actually unlearn.
Correct.
So everything you thought you knew, you realize, like, I don't know nothing. So you're literally like completely empty. And I remember just telling my book agent, like, this is what I'm going through. I'm in therapy. I don't have anything for you right now. And I said, but I've been keeping a journal though, just writing about some things that I've been experiencing in therapy, things that I've been sharing in therapy. And I actually have been writing about that. 'Cause the way I write, when I say journal, I actually just write. And so I shared some of that stuff with her, and she just was like, she just sold me on how powerful it could be for somebody like me to be sharing these things. And I'm like, I'm not an expert though. I'm just a person who has some experiences. So it was actually my book agent's idea to say, let's get a psychiatrist, a therapist. And in this case, it was my man, Dr. Ish Major, to give like the clinical correlations to the things you're talking about.
Wow, that's beautiful.
And so that's what we ended up doing. And that went out. And what I realized in that moment was, like, I wasn't even ready to have those conversations. It's one thing to write a book and share it with the world, but when you got to go out there and promote it.
Yes.
And so what people didn't realize in 2018, man, I was going through so much because like I said, I just was unlearning so many things. So I was really on this new journey of self. I didn't know who I was. I just knew that I was in one of these crazy pivotal positions to where who I was not who I was about to be. And I just really had to trust God in that moment. And man, there was there was a lot of things that was supposed to be on my plate in 2018 that got removed off my plate. And the only thing that was there was this book. And it was almost like God was saying, this is what you need to be focused on.
People need this.
And nothing else. And so my dad read the book. And also that same week of Thanksgiving, my younger cousin had completed suicide. I like to say completed because, Shanti Das of Silence to Shame, she says completed, and I like that for some reason. I don't like people doing it, but I like the language. Yeah. And he completed suicide, and my dad called me, and my dad was like, yeah, man, between, reading your book and, your cousin completing suicide, it just made me think about, that I was going to therapy 2 and 3 times a week. And I tried to kill myself, 30 plus years ago, but I didn't because of you and your older sister. We were the kids he had at the time. Wow. And he was like, I was on 10 to 12 different medications throughout my life dealing with my mental health issues. And I was like, what? Like, I knew none of that. And I remember asking my mom, like, yo, Dad was going through all of this. And she was like, I thought he was playing crazy to get a check. Yeah. Because I think even now he still gets a check from the state of South Carolina, right? Because when they don't know how to properly diagnose somebody or deal with somebody and they throwing everything at them from medication to therapy and everything else and it didn't work, here's a check. And so in my mind, I was like, if my dad would have told me this, because this was 2018, so I was 40, right? I just turned 40 that year. If my dad would have told me this 20 years earlier, I would have been in much better shape because I've been dealing with panic attacks and bouts of depression my whole life. Putting on the mask, showing up being a people pleaser. I know I was a people pleaser because I got molested at 8. That's something I learned through Bishop T.D. Jakes as well as therapy. I remember Bishop T.D. Jakes told me that people who, get molested at a young age usually struggle with a sense of self-worth. Same. Usually have some type of imposter syndrome. Usually feel like they're not worthy. And in that case, that resonated when he told me that, it resonated with me so much because the woman who used to, molest me, and it wasn't, and I just came to this revelation earlier this year. It wasn't even just her. I always just talk about her, But there was other situations of people doing it. But for whatever reason, I would just always use this one person as the symbol and the mascot for all of the pain and molestation I received as a child, right? And we didn't even call it molestation back then. It was humping, and
stop messing around.
Yeah, right? So she, when I was 8, used to do it to me, and then it's just one of those things I just stopped. Like, I don't know why, I just one day stopped. And I remember having these firecrackers, right? You remember the little poppers? You could throw the little paper poppers and they pop. And I had a bunch of them and I was just throwing them at her. Leave me alone, leave me alone, leave me alone. And from that moment, she just started calling me ugly. Like, literally. She was like, oh, you ugly, and was telling her, look at his nose is so big. Like, I mean, she would say this to other adults, like to the point where my grandma was putting like ointment on my nose, thinking like my nose was swollen and stuff like that. And that right there is what caused me to end up being a people pleaser. Because I'm like, if I don't give this woman what she wants, she's going to keep calling me ugly.
She just shifted her type of abuse.
Absolutely.
From physical to directly emotional, mental.
And you don't realize how from 8 years old to being a full-blown 20-year-old, 30-year-old, even 40 if you don't go do the work, how that will carry with you through all of that time.
Yeah.
And so, I don't even know what.
No,
I don't even know where to end this, but yes.
There's man, thank you for it takes bravery to share that. I think I was molested as a young guy, and it took me a lot of pain to get there, and to get to the truth and to get to what that did to me. And I plan on doing what you're doing, which is spending the rest of my life making sure that other people know you don't have to live like that, because I internalized a lot of my anxiety. Like, I'm leading people, I'm doing the thing, and I've got some issues, but I didn't know how to stop them.
And I also feel like as a man, like even just now, whenever you start talking about those things, for whatever reason, you always go back to those moments and you kind of get lost in that moment. Yeah. Like I don't even remember what we were initially talking about.
The same way.
But when it brings me back to that place, I just really go back to being that kid on my grandma's porch, throwing them poppers at her. And mind you, I've gone to therapy for it, talked about it. I've done things like ayahuasca, like everything. Yeah. I've done whatever I can to try
bad weed from Queens.
Everything. Word up. All of that. But when it comes up, and it just kind of like, I don't know, it just takes over you in a way. Like,
it happened to me yesterday, Hector. I was same thing. I was talking about my story, and I just was right in there again. And I've learned to let those emotions fly.
Yeah,
like if it hits me, it hits me. And I'm never going to get to a place where I can say I was sexually abused and just kind of, no, I mean, some days I feel like I'm on top of it. There are other days I just feel like, no, I feel this today. But I wouldn't have known that. You wouldn't have known to acknowledge that if you didn't do all the work. You have done a ton of work.
I was on a ayahuasca journey earlier this year, and one of the things that came up for me, because I never done ayahuasca before, that was the first time I did it, and one of the things that came up for me was a lot of this, like a lot of, that sexual abuse, right? But a lot of it, I didn't even label it as sexual abuse, right? But then it just all came up, and I'm like, oh, shoot. But you know what also came up? Grace. Because literally in that moment, like as I'm in the journey, it was like God was talking to me, or Spirit was talking to me, and it was like, they did it to you because it was done to them. So you have to be the person to break this cycle. It was literally so clear. And ever since then, because even when I did the ayahuasca journey, the only person I told my wife things that night that I had never told anybody, because it was one of those things where, like, when the journey was over, it was over for everybody else, but for me it wasn't.
Right.
Like, and if you ever done an ayahuasca journey, you do the journey and then you sit in a circle and you share.
Yep.
Everybody else went on about their way to go eat or whatever, and Mother Aya was like, "No, you lay back down. I'm not finished with you." I laid back down, and all of that stuff started coming up, and I just was telling my wife things that I had never, ever, ever, ever shared, because these are people that you love, right?
Yeah.
And still love, and it was just like it just gave me so much grace, and it put a lot of things in perspective for me, like how I am as a person, but also why I am the way I am as a parent. Because if you've ever experienced that parental paranoia that you have, you're going to always have that, if you got children. But one thing I have to do is I have to raise my kids out of love and not fear. Because I feel like my father raised me out of fear.
Yeah.
Because he went through everything he went through, and he just didn't want his oldest son to go through those same things.
So the baseline was fear and just blocking you from stuff and trying to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
No, we call it tough love, but it's fear.
Yeah, it's fear.
There's no such thing as tough love. Love isn't tough. I don't think so, right? I think that, I think love is love. It's just a pure emotion. You know what it is. And we bring all of these other things and surround love with it. And we don't realize that the love is at the core and at the center of what we want and what we're trying to attain. But we put all of these other things around love, and we got to fight through all of these things to get the love. We got to find our ways to just get rid of everything and just have the love.
Would you say that finding out how to love yourself was new for you? Because it was for me. Like I went when I was thinking about and learning about my abuse, and then the first thing that happened was I felt grace. And they teach you how to write a letter to your abuser, whether you send it or not. And I didn't have to finish it because I knew right away. No one does that if they haven't been through it themselves.
That's right.
And then that person ended up dying, and I remember feeling no emotion other than sadness, like no more anger, no more bitterness. And I think getting from that place to then going, okay, let me clear out all this stuff. Do I love myself? I was asked a question in therapy by an amazing counselor who said, hey, what do you think one of your greatest gifts is? I said, I'm empathetic. I care a lot about people. She said, yeah, that's evident. She said, when was the last time you were kind to yourself? And I was like, it even makes me even rethinking about it, because I'm like, man, I don't know what that would be like. What do you mean? I've never even thought about that. She's like, yeah, we need to talk about that for a couple of days, because it's pretty evident that you're not happy with yourself. And I'm like, well, I've done some things that I despise, and I've hurt a lot of people because of it. And she's like, yeah, but have you ever been kind to yourself? What does that look like? And then I learned how to do that. I mean, I led a church most of my life. I'm a Christian. I love Jesus. I'm trying to do all this stuff, but it had never really dawned on me, because I was always focused on, I love God. I love God. I love God. Only this chapter in my life, am I flipping that going, no, God loves me, which means I need to learn how to love me. Yeah, I'm on a journey. Yes, I'm broken. No, I don't have it all together. But my number one job is to be loved. Imagine that. Imagine people walking around the city going, like, what's your job today? Well, my first job is to let God love me. Did you find loving yourself was a new feeling? To look in the mirror and go, I'm proud of this man. I'm proud of who I am. I'm proud of where I'm headed.
Yeah, I think I saw an affirmation when I was young, and the affirmation was, your first, last, and best love is self-love. But for me, that's what it was. It was a great affirmation that sounded good, but it wasn't a practice that I was actually applying to myself. Because if you truly love yourself, you'll move like you love yourself.
Yeah.
When you were indulging in a lot of the self-destructive behaviors that I was indulging in, then there's no way that I could love myself. So when I was able to start doing more work on myself and like really setting an intention for what I wanted my life to be like, and what kind of man I wanted to be, and what kind of husband I wanted to be, and father and friend, that's when I really feel like I started truly loving myself.
I want to respect your time. So before I was going to tell people that you have decided to support Trump and be in his advisory, which was news to me. I walked in, people were like, you hear about Char? I'm like, what's he doing? He's going to be advisor to Trump. I'm like, that's a flip. So we'll keep that for the next show.
Now we can talk about it?
No.
Oh. He's joking.
I'm joking. It's going to be clipped. Charlamagne Tha. I think, man, there's so many places. I feel like, well, first I want to say, when those people come up to you and say, I go to therapy because of you, you need to understand that that's a legacy shifting moment. If you took 10 minutes today and just started to just sit in that and realize some of the sacrifices you've made have led to that, it's already happened to me here and there to a degree where people have said, hey, Carl, I've been living this kind of a life, and I heard the pod, and I do it. It's enough to get you through a year. But at your level, where you're at, I'm not sure I think you're a humble man, but it's a good idea to sit there once in a while and realize, man, God's really used me to change the trajectory of more lives than I could ever know.
Well, man.
So I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for your courage to be in this role and to drop your guard. And you look different. You sound different. Like you're still getting into good trouble. But it doesn't look like you can be moved very easy.
No, I can't. And what's so interesting about what you just said, during COVID is when I really started, when God really said, okay, now I want you to commit your life to helping brothers heal. Like on my arm right now,
Wow.
I got this tattoo when I was like 17 years old. It's a tattoo of Wolverine from the X-Men.
Wow.
I
wouldn't have picked that.
I've always been a huge Marvel
I did
fan.
know that. I didn't know you had a tat.
I got a tat, and this is when tattoos in South Carolina were illegal.
Wow.
And I got Wolverine holding a microphone in his hand. And the reason I always loved Wolverine was because of his healing powers. Literally, that's his ability.
So
and
your spirits always resonate with somebody who gets up.
I didn't even know. I just liked the fact he had his healing powers. So in my mind, it wasn't just his physical healing powers. I was young, saying to myself, I want to be able to bounce back from anything that hurts me, whether it's physical, mental, spiritual, emotional. I didn't know what that meant back then, right? Back then, it's just like you don't let things phase you, but that's when you kind of like become a sociopath, and that's when you start doing things to numb, like the drinking and the drugs and everything.
That's what I did,
right?
Yeah.
But I didn't know what actual healing meant back then. And then he's holding a microphone in his hand because I used to want to rap. So think about that. Now I'm 46 years old. I've devoted my life to helping people heal. Well, first devoted my life to my own healing, and then helping other people heal. And it's happened because of microphones, right? I got this tattoo when I was 16, 17. And I never said I wanted to get it covered up. I wanted to just get it done over.
Yep.
But I might just keep this original one my whole life just because now I truly understand what it means. And, 2020, I lost 2 friends to suicide. One was somebody that I met when I used to go, on vacation. So he was like somebody I met on vacation, but he became a good friend of mine, right? And he committed suicide. But then one of my really, really, really close friends, her name was Jasmine Waters. We called her Jazz Fly. She committed suicide in 2020. Did you know Jazz?
I did.
You didn't know Jazz, right? Yeah. I'm pretty. And she committed suicide, and man, those just hit me to my core. It just hit me in such a way, man. And it was those 2 things, and another situation that happened when the great brother Nipsey Hussle passed away. I remember having a conversation with his brother Sam, and Sam has since done a great interview with Big Boy, right, where he talks about a lot of these things.
Yeah.
And if anybody who watched that interview, you could see the pain in him. So imagine having this conversation with him like a year or 2 ago, right? When he probably hadn't even dealt with it, processed it that much, but he was there. And I remember just getting off the phone with him that night and saying to myself, I am going to spend the rest of my life just helping us as Black people heal. And so I already had my organization that I started, which is the Mental Wealth Alliance. Salute to Dr. Alfie Breland Noble. She runs that. And what we want to do is over the next 5 years, we want to get 10 million Black and brown people free therapy. And we want to increase the number of mental health professionals, culturally competent mental health professionals, because the numbers are very low for Black people. It's like 3%, 4%. We wanted to at least reflect the population of Black people in this country, 13%, 14%.
Wow.
So that's what, I spend a lot of my time doing. I got into an annual event I do. This will be the 4th year I'm doing it, called the Mental Wealth Expo.
I see you do it.
I do it here in New York City every year. It's a free event, open to all ages. We bring psychiatrists and therapists and spiritual leaders.
Yeah.
We've had everybody from, Dr. Rita Walker, who wrote a fantastic book called The Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health. We had Sarah Jakes and Torrey Roberts there one year. Dr. Alfie Breland Noble, of course. This year is my man Elliot Connie, who focuses on solution-focused therapy. He'll be there. My good sister Debbie Brown, she's always there. We're mixing it up this year. We got Tyrese coming, because Tyrese was on Breakfast Club a few weeks ago, and he had a very vulnerable moment.
Yes. It was awesome and real and hilarious.
Yeah, because he's dealing with so much grief.
Throw the Kleenexes. I said,
That's
I
right.
relate to you, brother. I got you.
He's dealing with so much grief.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to have him there in conversation with my man Jason Wilson. Jason Wilson wrote a fantastic book called Cry Like a Man. And I just think it's going to be very interesting to see those two have a conversation. Like, guys like my man Wallow's going to be there. I remember one year I had Wallow and another brother named Shaka Senko. Wallow did 20 years straight. Then he did 5 when he was a juvenile. So he's 45. So he's literally done more than half his life in prison. And then you got somebody like my man Shaka Senko, who did a prison stint as well. And so just having those two brothers on stage talking about, the mental and emotional impact being in prison has, not just on you, but your family and how you got to readjust to the world. The reason I had them there that year, and I got Shaka there again this year, and Wallow will be there again this year, is because the first year I did it, so many people that had just came home from prison or had done prison sentences were there. And their women and their wives and their daughters were introducing me to these brothers, and I was just like, oh, okay, I see what's going on. So I brought Wallow and Shaka there just to speak to those individuals. But yeah, I'm just really out here trying to do the work and really just trying to help people. And to your point, when you talk about helping to change lives, that's why I established things like the foundation, like the Mental Wealth Expo, because I'm the type of person, if I'm going to do it, let's do it. Like, I don't want to just do it a little bit. Like, if we're going to do it, let's really go big with it and make impact. And so I feel like I'm really making impact with those things. So I hope people go to mentalwealthexpo.com just to get more details on that. And you can go to the mentalwealthalliance.org, to see the work that we're doing with the MWA.
I'm going to plug all that in when we put this up, and I will ask you one more thing, get you out of here. I think, the first thing I think is you can't do all that stuff unless you do the work yourself. And I think there's a lot of people who have big dreams, and I want to go, hey, yeah, but you got to do the work.
That's
like
right.
You're able to give out of what you have now, and you can see God blessing it. And I think so. Just to catch all the ADHD listeners up, we have, a guy who is an icon in the industry.
Thank you.
When Drake throws you in and it becomes the coolest line of a song, popping bottles, Charlamagne, you've made it. And then to see what you've done with your platform, to say, yeah, this isn't just so you can be famous and cool. This is so you can use it for an impact. Just know that the guy who's doing all this, if you're listening, does a lot of work on himself.
That's right.
So start there. Don't start with your dreams. Don't start with your big ideas. Start with the biggest dreams, that are inside you, the biggest wounds inside you, and you never know what God can do. If you would have skipped those steps, Shar, you wouldn't be here. I sure as hell wouldn't be here.
I agree.
But you don't skip steps. You have done the hard work.
I agree. I was listening to, there's this new record Kendrick Lamar put out yesterday, and I think it's called Let the Party Die or The Party Must Die. I can't remember the exact title. But he's rapping about a lot of the things that he sees in the culture, a lot of things that he doesn't like, a lot of behaviors that he doesn't like. And I'm already on record saying that Kendrick Lamar is Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers in the future. That and Jay-Z 444, we're going to look at and say these are probably the two most important hip-hop albums of all time, just because of the subject matter those brothers decided to tackle, right? Like, those brothers are brothers that went to therapy.
I feel like Kendrick's been on that.
He has.
Not to this degree, but...
Yeah, but Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers really took it to another place, because this is the thing. They're talking about going to therapy. They're talking about doing right by their wives, right?
Who would have thought you would have heard that
from Jay-Z,
at the top of the game?
Yes, or even Kendrick, right? So them putting out those projects, man, was very important. But the song he put out yesterday is like still in that same vein. And I said something on the radio this morning, and I wish I would have expounded a little bit, but I was just like, yeah, Kendrick, you're not going to change all of these people. You're not going to change everything. And what I should have added to that was, we just got to all keep doing the work on ourselves as individuals. And I did say this, we have to be, I told Kendrick, continue to be the change you want to see in the world.
Beautiful.
And I really feel like that's what him doing the work on himself, because you can hear it, him doing the work on himself and doing the type of music that he's always done, but it's elevated to another level, and just putting that out into the world, that is going to impact who it needs to impact. But you're going to drive yourself crazy thinking you can change everybody.
If you're listening today and it hits you in the heart, you're not alone. So you're listening to a guy who is doing it all, what the world would see as doing it all, and you have human moments that you've had to work through. So it feels good sometimes when that's the beauty of rehab, is you sit there and you go, I'm not alone. But for people to hear today that when they see you in the bright lights, oh, he struggled with some of the same things that maybe people have, and it frees them today. Give me one tool before you go that when anxiety, because none of that stuff's a quick fix. I mean, we're getting over stuff, but you still have to battle it. What do you do when you feel the panic and the anxiety set in, that you have learned to be like, I can't live without tool that gets you back to center and makes your spirit feel and realize that you're calm?
Easy call for me. When I was young, I would always repeat this affirmation, right? And I didn't even realize it was an affirmation or a mantra until I got older. I would say, Fuck Satan, fuck Satan, fuck Satan. I love Jehovah God and his son Jesus Christ. I love Jehovah God and his son Jesus Christ. I love Jehovah God and his son Jesus Christ. Literally, because in my mind, reading the book of Job, they kept trying to get Job to curse God and die.
Right.
So my brain said,
I'm going to curse the
I'm
devil
going to curse
and
Satan and live.
Preach.
Literally. That's
Yeah.
literally where my mind was at
Yeah.
since I was a kid. And so I would, whenever I would have those panic attacks, I would say that. But what I also remember, what I was doing coupled with that, was I would be outside.
You go outside.
I would always go outside. If I was in my room, I would climb out my window. Literally. I would literally climb out my window and sit outside in South Carolina. Or I would just go walk in the yard or go walk down the dirt road. Yeah. And so now it's kind of the same thing, right? I get those panic attacks. If I'm somewhere warm, I take my shoes off, I go walk in the grass. I go do grounding. Like people think
Beautiful.
They think I'm bugging when I talk about hugging trees.
It's
but
real.
I really do go out there. I go out there and I put my back to the tree. I hug the tree. I put my forehead to the tree and just sit out there and just say a prayer, right? And do some breathing exercises, right? And then ask yourself, okay, being that I've done a lot of work on myself, it's like I know what the trigger is.
Yeah.
Back in the day,
I don't know why this happened. No, I know exactly what happened.
Yeah,
There's power in that.
That's right.
It takes the work to do
right.
that. It takes the work to get there.
That's right. And it helps you even in conversations with people because, all of our egos are fragile.
Yep.
And you can be having a conversation with somebody and somebody will say something that triggers you and automatically you take it personal. But you have no reason to take it personal. That person doesn't know that's your trigger. That's your trigger. You know what I'm saying? That's yours.
Yeah.
Now, of course, we might have some people in our life that know what buttons to
but
push.
it's not the world's responsibility to tiptoe around what you struggle with.
At all.
Yeah.
At all. So just, I've learned to just be able to really take a beat, do breathing exercises. I meditate. My good sister, Debbie Brown, we went away. It was actually the year of COVID, and I was with her in Kabul because that's her safe space. That's where she goes to find peace. And me and my family was in Kabul with her, and she led us through like a whole week of yoga and meditation.
I want to talk to her. You got to put me in touch with her.
Oh man, you and Debbie would have a phenomenal conversation. She's incredible. I've known Deb for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
I call her Tupac Chopra. Because literally when I met her in LA back in 2007, she's an evolved version of who she always was, even back then.
Yeah.
And so like she put me onto the beads and just counting the beads, and I got a mantra that I chant, and all of those things help me. So between meditation and breathing exercises and nature and just therapy, because now I know what these triggers are. I know what these panic attacks are. All of that stuff helps me when I have these panic attacks, which I still have, by the way.
Yeah, I still have my battles, and to capsulize what you said, I have the same one, which is you have to change what you say and change what you see. Change what you say, which is your mindset, and then because by saying it, if you sit there and say I'm fearful, I'm panicked, but if you sit there and say I'm going to get through this, I'm calm, I'm in control, things are going to be okay. Now you've changed what you've said, and then you have to change what you see, which is to go outside. And immediately those two things it doesn't cost you any money.
Nothing.
It doesn't cost you, just give it a shot. So people really, really struggling with anxiety, change what you say immediately and change what you see when you feel all that heat coming. So you are, and also know this, you are a leader in the Black community, but the white community, speaking as a white guy, I don't know if you know that or not, I'm a 45-year-old white guy. You impact everybody, bro. There is no limit to your anointing to change. So I know that you have a heart for your community, and while you do that, know that the overflow is hitting everybody, brother.
I love people, man.
Yeah, you do.
Like I really, genuinely, truly just love good people. I love good energy. Like I've always been that type of person. I'm attracted to good energy. I like walking in a room and feeling safe. And we all as humans know when we feel safe and we know when we don't. And I mean, I got friends who I love that are white that I love them just as much as I love any of my Black friends.
Yeah.
I got some white friends that I'll come to their aid probably before some Black people just because they're my friend.
Yes.
Like I've been put in those type of situations where I had one person in particular, and I tell this story all the time, but I remember, Kanye, and it's not no diss to Kanye, but he called me trying to get me to turn on one of my good friends, Pete Davidson. And that's Peter's like I
You
know
hooked us up back in the day. I don't know if you remember that when he was really, really struggling before he was mega star. You and I talked and we connected. Yeah.
Wow. But yeah, I mean, I know Pete since he was 16.
Yeah.
Like he's a 16-year-old young man
Trying to figure it out.
Trying to figure it out. Who we all did Guy Code together, and it was just one shoot that we did, and he literally, wait, where you going? I'm going to dinner. Came to me with dinner, and literally he just always been attached to me in that way. I love that guy, right?
Yeah.
Like as a person, I've watched him literally
I love him too.
grow.
He's a good dude. Yeah.
So it's just like, you know, when somebody calls you and says like, you need to help me. You know, you supposed to be culture and you black. And I'm like, that don't got nothing to do with nothing. That's my friend. I'm not like, his mother calls me. I've been to his house. You don't play with, if you've been to somebody's mother's house and ate the mother's food,
it's gonna be tough to get you off the spot.
You're not doing that. I'm very loyal to my people in that way, regardless of, you know, what their race
Well,
is.
you were super kind and encouraging to me. I called you early on just to apologize to the people that I love, and you wouldn't even let me finish the sentence. You just encouraged me, and
you owe me no apology.
That's who you are.
I got your back regardless. Like, you know, we human.
That's who you are.
Word.
And you are loved, you are supported, and you're a blessing. And thank you for doing this. This deposit's going to help a lot of people.
I hope so. Thank you for having me, brother.
And to the future, brother, it's going to keep getting brighter and brighter. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you, brother.
You are a blessing. And this Lights On with Charlamagne episode version 1. There will be more.
Word.
In
Absolutely.
Jesus' name. I love you, brother.
Love you too, brother.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.